in reds, I didn't have a timer, and I went to half.
Okay. I will make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay. Thank you. So it's good. Maybe they break the for cats. Yeah. Yeah. I got it. This is happening.
Service is our success.
But no, there was no line.
Okay. Okay. I think we are, or we should be ready to start. So welcome to the Spice Bath. I invited a co-chair, Paul Atreides, but he couldn't come. So I have Paul Waters, our security AD, here. Thank you, Paul, for helping me out. So a few words at the beginning. So although we are on the second day already, and you've seen these templates a couple of times already, the note well, the whole process here is governed by various different policies, and you see the links included on the slide deck, from copyright to patents and code of conducts and the standards process and so on. So please make sure that you are familiar with the process and with these documents. Likewise, there's the note well for virtual meetings or remote participation. Be gentle to each other, and I think we've been very civilized so far in the discussions on the list and the conference call. So I'm not worried, but keep that in mind. The session is recorded, and please scan the QR code before you go to the microphone, and also scan it even if you don't go to the microphone, because we need to see on how many people participated. And I'm also suggesting that you, for later discussion of the charter text, you actually download the slides. I've copied in the relevant parts with a proper font size into the slide deck, so that we have an informed debate unless you memorize the charter text. And there's only one deck, so I made it very convenient for you. So this is the second BOF of SPICE. We had one BOF at the Prague IETF meeting, which in my opinion was quite successful. We had good discussions. There was, I was doing it together with Roman. There was feedback, great support, lots of participants, many people who said that they would be willing to review documents, to contribute to documents. However, the charter text wasn't ready, so there was some uncertainty about the exact scope of the work and what some of the proposed milestones actually mean. And we've spent the time after IETF 118 till this IETF meeting with discussions and fine-tuning of the charter text. And I think that made good progress. We had weekly conference calls. We had experts giving their view on various different technologies, MDoc, OAuth, and various other working groups. And luckily also, we have people contributing IETF drafts that provide some, at least I would say, a good idea about what the potential deliverables could look like. I've also linked the charter text. You can of course find them on the mailing list, and if you search for the data tracker page as well. Good. So before I jump into the agenda for today's meeting, Paul, did I forgot something? You have anything? Okay. Yaron is the scribe. Thank you, Yaron. We've decided that it would be a good idea to briefly summarize the proposed work items it's very high level. I asked Hank, Ori, Mike, Brent, and forgot one person, Roy, sorry, Roy, to speak about those items in case you don't remember exactly anymore what was discussed on the list. It's just a refresher. It's not a replacement for actually reading the documents which we have in the meanwhile. And then I would like, that's a hopefully shorter section. And then I would like to go to the charter text discussion to complete that off. We had discussions. I was hoping that we would be able to finish the discussions and agree on the charter before the meeting. Unfortunately, that didn't quite happen. So I'm hoping that we could do that quickly today, but we essentially have the whole meeting time to do that. And I would like to, as a goal for this meeting, walk out of the room with an agreement on the charter text and be done with sort of this initial setup phase. Okay, good. So into the summary part. Hank, you start with architecture. Where's the microphone? Oh.
Hello, everybody. Luckily, this is a Tuesday. Is this a Tuesday? As a Tuesday. And so most people are still awake. Maybe. So this title slide, I have 5 minutes. So this title slide is called Architecture. There is no actual architecture document today, but we have two viable inputs to this. There's a transparency token document from Ori, which is basically focusing on principles and workflows and all these items and formats and how they work together. And I think it's a good list of the items we can use to create a good architecture. I think it's something we can cherry pick from, and I don't think all of it will go into an architecture document, but I think that is very valuable to read. Live augmented that basically by having some actors, actually a normative language around them, and says how to profile this into things that work in reality. So these two documents are our basis for the upcoming architecture document. On the right side, you see our eDoc. It's our Azure diagram of contents, not to be confused with MDoc. And there should be status checks at the bottom here. So the issuers and the verifiers also do things, but I think it was cut off somehow. These are roles. There are things between them. It's a summary of a problem statement that we inherited. We do not invent all that. What we are doing here at the IETF, or trying or want to do here at the IETF in the SPICE working group, is to provide simple ways, scalable ways, again, to profile with normative language, procedures to present identity documents about not only people, but also about machines, about systems, about relationships, and how to derive information from that. And that is very important to highlight with IETF existing building blocks. And that's a former part of Life's document, of course, and also somehow in Ori's, we are using web tokens for that as a basis. That's the plan. And I think the architecture will give you a good overview how this story is told. I think that is something we have to write yet. And I think that is an excellent start. So whatever this eDoc now tells you here is not written in stone. Again, we inherited that. If we find something like a fourth role, so for example, that is useful in other environments, we can make this a pyramid. Or is it a pyramid? No, it's a tetrahedron, whatever. And so basically, we are not set in stone with this process. And it's kickstarting a hopeful, very stable document. It will take us for about a decade to do viable credential production, presentation, and the corresponding flows. Basically, that's it.
Cool. Yeah.
And Richard Barnes.
Thanks, Hank. Yeah, for some of you who followed the discussions on the mailing list, this triangle was kind of, and the terminology around it was a contentious point on how you define issuer, verifier, and holder. But at least the triangle was always there. Richard.
Okay, yeah, so thanks. So this, This is my new favorite ASCII art. Thank you for putting that together. So yeah, clearly the issuer holder verify model makes sense. This group doing work on credentials makes sense, I think, and probably on the proof side as well. The thing I was going to just highlight is that I think we are already seeing desires to pull these credentials into other protocols that have presentation semantics, like we had a presentation on TLS VCs. There's a document in MLS about VCs there. So the proof bits might get mixed in with some other protocols, but obviously having some guidance about, maybe some proof building blocks that could get used in building those and things like that, guidance. Just that this group's not going to own all the proof stuff.
Exactly. Owning something takes is a duty. It comes with a lot of responsibility, and we are the IETF. So we try to be precise, minimal, crisp here. That is a definite design goal.
Okay, perfect.
Wonderful.
Oh, was there another one?
Hi, Brent Zundell. I was asked to talk about some of the use cases that we're hoping to enable with the output of the SPICE working group. One of them is physical supply chain tracking. Currently, in the physical supply chain, information is passed via paper documents, at best a scanned PDF. It's really challenging to track end-to-end exactly where things came from with any sort of verifiability or provenance attached. We need the ability to do regulatory data capture. So when something shows up in the United States, the importer can have confidence that it wasn't produced with slave labor, or that it was produced by factories that were in places that don't use children. And it's challenging to maintain that information across the entire supply chain. The inspection information, the permits and the compliance certificates, all of these could exist as digital credentials that get passed along, and that would be incredibly valuable. It would increase just efficiency. The number of shipments that are halted at a border while we wait to figure out whether or not maybe it's okay to bring it in is a very real problem that we're trying to solve, and SPICE would take us a long way toward getting there.
Roy?
Yeah, Roy Williams. The physical supply chain and the software supply chain are running into similar sort of issues of scale. For physical supply chain, it's down to factories that have identities, not necessarily corporations, and you have to walk the chain backwards. We're in a case where we're having to infer data at the moment to understand supply chains, and that's not a sustainable thing in the long term. The way to get out of that is going to be digital signatures of documents at this level. It's not people, it's not corporate officers, it's companies or factories that we need to do this. And that's why we kind of need to get into this space. At scale, we think we're going to end up having to use notarization systems such as SCIT and others, which gets into COSI. And so part of this is a push for CWT and COSI support in general over and above what classically is being pushed as JOSI and JWT.
Thanks.
Mike Perrock here. This section of the use case actually started around provenance of data. And part of that is because when we're dealing with supply chain stuff in practice, what we see is a ton of interesting things being gathered from all over the place. And I think this is a section of the use case, while what's in the use case doc is valid, there's kind of this secondary aspect that we're seeing emerge, particularly with real world regulatory cases, where we need to go show how and when data was collected and in what order. Now, part of that is covered by things like SCID. How can I go drop stuff on and notarize that this message was picked up by a system somewhere? A web crawler found some information, or common case we're seeing now is someone provided a bunch of evidentiary documents and we need to witness those so that they can then be turned over to a legal team. The other aspect of that, though, is what credential formats do we use and how do we pass those around, right? And that's what this group, I think, can address here. So it's a critical part.
Thank you, Mike.
Is it CWT next?
Yeah.
I'm going to stay up here and then pull Ori up right behind me. SD-CWT popped up because JSON might be a little heavy for some of the data and volumes we're dealing with, honestly, is a problem we've run into in the real world. CBOR is just a lot more practical for the kind of data we're dealing with and the volumes of data we're dealing with over the wire. We're not doing anything new here. It's not super fancy. It's basically saying I need a mechanism to sign the hashes so you can go through and verify that and disclose some data so that you can expose only the information that someone is required to see or is allowed to see based on their permissions and to handle privacy concerns without disclosing anything else, but still know that the overall data has not been tampered with. Very common use case, very much modeled off of MDoc and some other things that are out there, but addressing some of the learnings we've had from SD-JWT, from MDocs, et cetera, in practice. So that's part of why we see this up in the unprotected header from the disclosure side that came in as the O2 side of this draft. The other side is that in practice with things like SCID and other things, we do need counter signatures on this data as well. So it's not enough to just maybe say, hey, I'm disclosing this piece of information from an inspection permit by a national plant protection organization. I think everyone went through customs here. You didn't realize that was going on in the background. That's a real world thing that happens every time you check that box and say, I didn't go to a farm. There's a piece of data. Or if you did, there's another piece of data attached to that. The results of that information might get disclosed, but not the details of it. And that's an important thing from a privacy aspect. Ori, would you like to comment at all on any of this?
Hi, Ori Steele. As Mike mentioned, this sort of approach to selective disclosure credentials is not fundamentally new concept. So the ISO MDoc format also has a selective disclosure capability. It looks sort of similar to the OAuth SD-JOT format and the OAuth SD-JWT VC formats. I think, like Mike mentioned, important for COSI is that in those other credential formats, we have a lot of sort of binary text encoding issues, and so for data at scale, COSI can give us much smaller message sizes. It's going to be able to handle interesting new kinds of data that aren't necessarily just text formats. What I like about the examples, especially on the left-hand side of the screen here, showing counter signatures and receipts, these credentials with these privacy capabilities can interface into other IETF systems that already have additional value in privacy and confidentiality applications. So, one of the applications for transparency services is to be able to have a service provider take responsibility for witnessing some set of evidence and then be a new sort of trust point for certifying that information moving forward. And counter signatures can give you a similar type system. SCID receipts can help with that, but the layering between these two formats, they can be combined to give some really interesting properties in terms of trading off the information that's retained in a transparency log, and the information that a holder of a credential might need to present in order to proceed through some software system or physical checkpoint that's receiving presentations. And I want to come back to something that Richard said, in terms of the presentation side of this. One of the things we've seen with SD-JOT is that the presentation format can be a tricky thing to think about in terms of protocols. Because of the way the tokens are constructed, you could have scenarios that adding a receipt, especially the bottom example here, could be maybe not necessarily exactly what you're thinking, because the disclosures are currently in the unprotected header there, and the receipt is for the information that the transparency service witnessed. So by adding this receipt, we can actually get an additional layer of integrity on which specific claims were disclosed. And the way that that gets implemented, it can be very challenging. Within SCIT, we've had a lot of conversations around how do you support multiple receipts? What does that mean? Are these sort of a chain of trust statements, or are they parallel trust statements? So these cozy constructions have a lot of utility in, they're kind of going above and beyond the built-in parallel signatures or single signatures that cozy supports today. And I'm happy, I've done a sort of preliminary implementation in cozy and CBOR based on the SDJOT work. And one of the things I really liked about it was not having to sort of alter the media type, but I'm able to make use of the cozy unprotected header to pass the disclosures. So it's been a really fun and fairly straightforward to implement it, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have around the differences between this particular credential format and some of the other credential formats you might be aware of. And if there are no questions, I'm happy to go back to my seat.
No. You don't go.
I'm covering this one as well. All right. Sure, you don't want to ask me questions about SDCWT? So, to the mic.
Or which question would you like to answer?
So Mike Perrock here. I would like to note that COSE gives us an interesting property that works very well for the kinds of data that we're dealing with, because we have a situation where large aspects of the regulatory supply chain are being digitized. However, there's still huge amounts of this legacy data that is not going to go away overnight. And so we need this ability to have detached signatures cleanly, and possibly even embedded in things of PDF, working with things like C2PA and some of the other initiatives that are out there. And so that real world bridging between things like doc files and, on the MS Word side, as well as PDFs and things like that, that's a reality that we deal with day to day. And we need a good standardized set of best practices for how to handle those situations. And COSE is very well suited to that. SDCWT is well suited to that use case as well.
Yeah, just one comment, since you mentioned detached signatures and signing, selective disclosure over potentially, arbitrary content types. One of the things that's interesting and exciting about COSE is we can put CWT claims in a header. We can do the same kind of selective disclosure we see in OAuth SDJOT, but paired with a securing an entire file, either by value or by reference. And so like Mike was saying, in terms of revealing specific claims about an artifact or an arbitrary media type, some of the capabilities that COSE has for that are exciting to explore for supply chain applications. Richard.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we've got the SDJOT and SDJOT VC stuff already started in OAuth. We're now talking about SDCWT and presumably SDCWT VC coming here. How do you think those relate? Are they roughly equivalent encodings of the same thing? And if so, how do we keep those in sync?
That's a great question. So, HOSI and COSE they share a lot of philosophy and a lot of claims in registries. And to most implementers, they may look really, really similar. And in some places they really are. And in other places, there's significant differences between them. Sometimes those differences have really important security implications. So when we think about porting a design that worked well in HOSI to COSE, we have to be cautious about how we do that. Sometimes the layering binding in encryption can end up being different. The supported encryption algorithms can be different. So we have to be cautious about that. And like I mentioned, in OAuth land, we have JSON Web Tokens. They're always expressed in a compact format. In COSE and CBOR, we have basically bytes, and we have the unprotected header. And so you can, to the extent that it's possible, you can align these, but there are going to be differences, and in the design, you should lean into the capabilities and sort of aesthetics and developer conventions that have developed in Cozy, and make sure that the solution is going to be secure, align with developer expectations, and make use of like the advancements or just unique differences between the two formats, while also keeping them kind of conceptually aligned, hopefully making it easy for a developer who's built a system in one to upgrade to the other if they choose, or maybe go the other direction for some reason.
Justin Richer. So corollary to that, is there desire or appetite or intent to pull the Jose flavored versions of especially VC related artifacts into this group should it form?
So I'll answer part of that, and then I'll kick part of it to Hannes. But in the discussions as SPICE was sort of forming, we talked a lot with the authors of digital credential work within the OAuth working group. And I mentioned OAuth SDJWT. It's kind of the generic envelope format for selective disclosure. And then there's a profile of it called OAuth SDJWT VC, which is the credential format itself. It's my understanding that at this time the OAuth group is advancing those documents. They're making great progress. There's good open lines of communication between folks who are participating in SPICE and SCIT and OAuth. There's actually a good amount of overlap between folks there. So I don't. It's my understanding at this time there's no plans to move anything, and in fact there's no group to move anything to, because we're not a working group. This is a buff. Hannes, you have.
No, completely right. We discussed this at the last meeting. Obviously, it was a topic that came up. We asked the debated this in OAuth, and that was the conclusion. Back then, of course, future is always unpredictable. We'll see where things go. But so far, everyone is happy, and we'll see how this evolves over time.
Yeah, so I'll thank Justin for making more explicit the subtext of my earlier question, which is that I think it would probably, assuming we form a working group here that is looking at credential stuff, I think it would be good to have all of the credential stuff we have going on in relatively the same location. So I think pulling the SDJOT and or SDJOT VC stuff over here into a SPICE thing alongside the COSE versions would be a good idea for what it's
maybe in the future. Let me ask a question before we switch over to the next slide. We use a lot of acronyms, and at the BOF in Prague, some of you expressed concerns or had questions about the details on what some of the items meant. And now we obviously went completely deep into it. We have documents explaining it. You can actually look at the, so to speak, at the CDDL level at it. Raise your hand if you are familiar with the JSON Web Token. Oh, okay, you are correct. Just a sense. Are you?
While Hannes is doing that, I'll expand on my previous point a bit and note that it's not just the raw credential formats that are at issue here. There's also things like presenting issuer metadata that are not directly tied in the Jose COSE, but like should be consistent across the two.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Next slide.
Well, actually, I wanted to comment to that. I'm a little resistant, this is Roy Williams, moving them all together because there's a lot of focus on individual identity discussions, and there's whimsy for workflows and so forth. We would lose focus on some of these core scenarios if we put them all together. And so I'm a little resistive of saying, hey, they all belong in one group. I think they should work tightly together, but I'm a little cautious about saying, hey, fold them all together.
Yeah, I just to respond to that, quickly, like I think the intention here is to make sure that the envelope formats that could be consistently profiled for a use case are influencing each other, and the security considerations that are relevant to one are being considered by the others. I think from a use cases perspective, if we're talking about identity credential use cases in a workload, cloud workload environment, or physical hardware environment, or personal credentials from your phone environment, each of those use cases are different, and they might invite distinct profiling. And yet the envelope formats that Spice could develop could be broadly applicable to all of those use cases, or at least that would be my hope.
Yeah, we are around 50 people. So I would say like this room is a hardcore CWD group. Now it's previously we had the JSON Web Token question. Now we have the sort of the lightweight version of it, the CBOR Web Token. Just to get a sense, so we're not talking about things that nobody has a clue about, but it looks pretty good as well. Okay, so but let's continue with the queue. Who's next here? Hank.
Yeah, so just talking about where documents typically should go. In the end, where the experts are, that's fine. You said communication channels are there, great. I'm a CDDL addict, and as soon as I start to write something that would support both formats, where they're general and then have select the extension points where the other things stick in, I wouldn't know where to go, right? Because it's both. So now I don't, but let's arrive at that point and then see.
Martin.
It seems to me like there's a pretty significant diversity. Oh, who am I? Martin Thompson. I apologize. Diversity of use cases for these things and sort of very broad applicability. That suggests to me that we can talk about use cases here, we can talk about use cases in OAuth, we can talk about use cases in a number of different groups, Whimsy, Skit. Have I listed all of them yet? Probably not.
That's okay.
But there's just going to be one or two formats that's going to be developed out of this one. It suggests that there's a separate working group from all of those that is responsible for maintaining these formats. Just an idea.
I'm not sure I fully.
Let me grab that. I think
Yeah.
I'm having the same thought. This is other Martin Thompson. The American flavor. So, I mean, I in my course mind think of this like, think of VCs roughly as certificates in the sense like they're binding identity attributes to keys and under signatures. Like we all know that certificates show up in a bazillion different use cases with different flavors, but there's still a pretty common core format that it was defined in one place and there's a lot of library support. Now we've by accident of history ended up with two formats here, but like two is only one better than one, and we can still kind of have that core set of formats that accommodates a bunch of use cases that we discuss in Whimsy or wherever. But like let's do the common format, and do the two common formats that we've looked into in one place.
Well, the good thing is we have the formats already. At least to a large extent. What we don't have, which is what I'm going to show, what this slide, for example, shows is we have some of the privacy additions with. Oh,
Can you close the
to
poll so
be
we
clear,
can
when I
see the
said the
slide?
format, I mean like SDJ/CWT
yeah.
and -VC attached to those. So like I think those are the primitives to be defined, as core building blocks that can then get applied to various supply chain or workload or user identities, what have you, right?
Okay, so the poll for me concluded that this is a group that is very familiar with those two technologies. So I feel very comfortable. Who do we have? Justin.
Justin Richer. So I think one of the things that this group needs to answer as it's forming is whether it wants to be a vertically focused group like Whimsy, where we're not specifically looking at specific technologies, but a specific set of problems in a very specific problem space, or Skit, which is looking at a very specific kind of problem space. Or if it wants to be a more horizontally focused group where we're looking at the containers and protocols, knowing that there are lots of different use cases, some of which will be sort of core driving use cases, but with the idea that what the thing that we're building we could use across a bunch of different things. Every time that I have read the Spice Charter and the discussions around it, I get the impression it should be the latter. It should be a sort of wider reaching group. So, kind of what Richard was saying, in that this is where the formats should be. And if the use cases driving those formats get discussed in all of these other places, that's awesome. Bring those discussions also here, but don't make everybody develop their own VC container weird thing for their vertical. And to me, ultimately, that would be the value of Spice, is to have that type of container that could be reused across a lot of different things. That's what I would like to see out of this group.
Well, currently the charter, at least what the people on the group agreed, is a little bit different because like we have specific milestones and specific, we have use cases, and they point, as Ori and the others presented earlier, they focus on, like here, the SDCWD. It doesn't say selective disclosure JWD, for example. That's what the group so far at least settled on.
Yeah, I understand. Even so, I think that the notion of this is where those types of containers, especially in particular VC and related style document stuff, gets worked out. I think we need a place in the IETF to do this. There were 2 presentations in Dispatch that dealt with VC flavored and related things. There's no place to dispatch them to right now. This would be a really good place for that to happen. That, I believe, is separate from having a set of well-defined deliverables that we start with right now, versus having a community where we know where this type of stuff can go and can attract that type of expertise.
Well, I'm not. So the dispatch work was on the verifiable credentials from the W3C, which is not what we are doing here. So in that sense, it's probably not a one-to-one match.
It's also not what we're doing here.
Nobody has so far proposed to put SD CWDs or SD JWDs into TLS.
Yet. Data tracker's open. Somebody get on that.
Stop summoning.
You're missing the point that I'm trying to make. So let me try to rephrase that. It's more the fact that the internet has reinvented certificates again, and we call them VCs and MDocs and various other things, right? And people are realizing that there are unique properties to these technologies that allow them to be applied in new and interesting ways that we couldn't do before. That's where we're getting a lot of the selective disclosure stuff that, like, try doing that with an X509 identity certificate. You can't.
You actually could very much, but
I don't want to debate that right now.
No.
I mean, you could also implement a web server in PostScript, but we're not here to argue that. Regardless, when these topics start coming up across the IETF, I really believe we ought to have a place where we are collecting the expertise about how to do that kind of stuff. And it's my hope that Spice becomes that place instead of it being distributed throughout different things. SDJOT is a token format. I don't think it belongs to NoAuth, but I didn't think JOT belonged to NoAuth at the time either. So that part's fine, whatever. SDJOT VC is a specific application of that ties to a specific type of identity document presentation format that really has very specific properties that go beyond what the SD structure is really about.
Yeah. So I would suggest that we sort of like pause here, defer the discussion to a little bit later, actually, and first talk about what we have so far, what we had in the last few months prepared, and what we thought that we had an agreement on till yesterday. And then we open the Pandora's box again, and then figure out, like, is that too narrow, too focused, and then go from there. How is that?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent.
I was trying to sit down like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. I'll hold your thought. We'll do that, but
Let me finish
If-
the other contentious slide.
it's
So this slide is to talk about one of the topics that we had a lot of discussion on the list about, and it has to do with this metadata or capability discovery component. So as Justin was just mentioning, these are essentially a new flavor of certificate. You'll find that there are many ways to discover keys. It's one of the favorite things of IETF groups to say that key discovery and identity is out of scope. And in a lot of cases, that's the smartest possible thing that a working group can do. As a side effect of that, we often see pieces of metadata discovery regarding certificates or credentials reinvented in flavors that are similar. Sometimes they're an improvement over existing work. Sometimes they're not. So in the two, everything except for in the red box is stuff that's happening in IETF in other working groups. The first piece is OAuth SDJWT discovery, and you can see this well-known endpoint with a JWT VC issuer and then a tenant. So that's a well-known URI prefix with some dynamic component piece at the end of it, and then that's how you can discover keys for an issuer. And that would be then the beginning of your verification journey to trust credentials from that issuer. And on the other side, you have the SCIT API definitions and disclosure. This is a SCIT draft that's being progressed, so it may not look like this, may never look like this again. But the idea here is, SCIT transparency services also need to support discovery mechanisms, and so we're looking at things like the OpenID configuration, which helps you discover keys for an authorization server and how tokens are signed. And we're wondering, SCIT needs to sign receipts, so perhaps a similar metadata discovery capability could help discover the keys for a transparency service, other supported algorithms for that transparency service. You can see ES256, the signature algorithm this particular service supports. There's many other interesting details that you might want to discover about an issuer or a holder or verifier, those parts of the triangle from the first slide. And the idea behind this particular proposed milestone is really like, we want to document where we can talk about what people are doing in all of these different places regarding capability and metadata discovery for credential use cases. And we think that, in particular for the current SPICE metadata discovery document, there are some scenarios around discovery that have been really, really difficult in terms of making sense of identifiers and credentials that aren't rooted in HTTPS or other really successful IETF protocols. So this is an idea, it's a starting point, and it's meant to sort of be a place where we can capture the work that folks are doing in various other working groups where they're creating credentials, and perhaps we can try and integrate those proposals, or at the very least make it so that HOSI and COSI applications that require a similar discovery mechanism, that experience is not wildly different depending on whether you picked CBOR or JSON.
Cool.
Brent is in the queue.
Yep. But that no, I copied the charter text into a few slides to show you what we came up with so far. I sort of summarize on a high level what's in there, and then we open the discussion and see whether we are happy with that or not.
Do you want me to sit down?
Okay. Yeah.
You want me to answer Brent's question first?
No. We'll defer it and then talk about what we have, refresh our memory, and then we go in and say, is this too narrow? Are we unhappy about the things, the items we created? Do we want to have additional ones? or different ones, and then we see what we get.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. So the introduction essentially describes what Richard called a certificate. And here we use the term digital credential. It says a digital credential expresses claims, assertions, or attributes about a subject, such as their name or age and their cryptographic keys. Some sets of claim names have already been defined by the IETF. Those would be the ones registered for CWD and JWD in IANA, and other standards development groups such as the OpenID Foundation. And then the next paragraph talks about this triangle and tries to make an attempt to define what the issuer, the holder, and the verifier is, which I'm not going to read to you because you've just heard about it. And of course, sometimes you may have more than one credential, and that's fine too. That's what the last sentence says. In the gold section, which is the next one, we talk about what we want to do in this group, which is about profiling, taking the existing work and tailoring it. There is some, as mentioned also, there's some ongoing work in the Jose and the OAuth working group. We just spoke about OAuth with the selective disclosure, and that provides some privacy properties, namely the selective disclosure. But there's also some stronger privacy properties that are being worked on in the Jose working group with the JSON web proofs, which use some cryptographic protocols. We didn't present a document about this, a profile, because that work, this JSON web proof work, is more is less mature. Let's put it that way, or is in development. And of course, there would be a need to collaborate with some of those other working groups because there is already a lot of related work going on, specifically when it comes to presentation. So we need to stick it into other protocols, and we have this list of protocols like RATS for attestation, OAuth for the obvious delegation, and the building blocks within Jose and COSI, and also this KIT working group for this registry that we mentioned earlier. Okay. Okay, Brian, thank you. There are obviously a number of use cases illustrated in from the earlier presentation. There are more use cases in this document. This use case document has been updated in time for the deadline. So if you haven't reread this new version, please do so. It's a very good document, in my opinion. And the use cases are supposed to guide engineering decisions, requirements for these proposed standards of this program of work. And then we have the usual caveat that people were debating up and down on a mailing list about security by design, privacy by design, and those type of things. And also the use of some of the newer technology that we would all like to use, namely trusted execution environments, the remote attestation, confidential computing, hardware security modules, and so on. Work that is obviously leveraged in other working groups already in the IETF. I talked about the privacy. The last sentence also highlights this important privacy angle. What is out of scope is this general key discovery. Ori just talked about it, and there are examples on how some of that key discovery is being proposed in other organizations. Here's what we thought would be what we want to do is we want to create an architecture document which includes the terminology, obviously the communication patterns for this credential issuance and also the presentation to the verifier. A proposed standard, and that would be an informational document. A proposed standards document for these digital credential profiles covering these JSON web proofs and the CBOR-based counterpart. Likewise, a standards document for the selective disclosure CWD, and for the final item, proposed standard for the metadata and capability discovery. So we had those 4 items, deliverables, as a starting point. That's what we had come up so far. And now I'm opening up the queue again. Brent, go to the mic and
Thank you, Chair. Brent Zundell. I queued for 3 reasons. I'm trying to remember them now. I wanted to agree with Richard and Justin about I think Justin said it well, the horizontal nature of what we're trying to produce rather than sticking to a particular vertical. I think that will be good moving forward and healthy. The second thing, I don't remember. The third thing was there was some mention of what is the relationship between this and work that was happening at the W3C. Happy to take questions on that or talk about it. I chair the Verifiable Credentials Working Group at the W3C, and I am very supportive of SPICE. So happy to have that conversation.
Or well, you could maybe briefly summarize for those who care.
Yeah, so
since you already teased the point, right?
Happy to. So the Verifiable Credentials Working Group at the W3C has produced a data model document that is a JSON-LD format, and it has, because it's JSON-LD based, certain requirements such as, there are context values and other limitations to that document. Additionally, that group is producing a couple of different mechanisms for securing that data model. There were attempts within that group to suggest broadening the scope of things and not sticking to JSON-LD and engaging with some of the more IETF-based technologies. But ultimately, the group decided to not pursue that. And so from my perspective, SPICE is, taking the next steps, focusing on the registry-based IETF-centric technologies, and in many ways doing similar things, but with a set of technologies that is more at home here. Hopefully that's clear.
Perfect. Thanks. Rowan.
Hello, Rowan May. I think the BOF in Prague went really well. I was really pleased with it. And I came in here and I felt like, we were way down in, like 4 levels deep in details unnecessarily. And when I'm looking at the charter, I don't really understand I don't feel like we have a good scope. And I feel like a charter is a tool that you can use in the working group when somebody comes with something super wacky that you can say, look here, it says in the charter, we're not doing that. And I think this group is going to get quickly overwhelmed with requests like that. And so I think it's very important that the charter contain a more obvious scope about what we plan to do. So I've looked at the use case document and I'm looking at the charter. So the first sentence, a digital credential expresses claims, assertions, or attributes about a subject, such as their age, their name or age. And one of the first slides we had here was talking about supply chain and whether child labor was involved in the production of something, right? The subject wasn't even named. So what's the scope of the subjects?
Well, the charter can only go so far, right?
Well, maybe a sentence might be useful.
Well, you could have proposed a sentence on a like several months discussion. Like we had to decide on some form without going into, and that was our challenge because people wanted to essentially do the work into the charter already. And I think you are down that rabbit hole as well. Like we need to form a group to then do the work, not do the work to put it into the charter. That's my.
I mean, I think we need you both. It's like, it's not like the work to like, it's not like we're going to stop working on SD, CWT in order to figure out what the charter looks like. But I feel like this would be a good way, this is a good venue for discussing what things we don't want to do, what kind of subjects or what kind of digital credentials we don't want. Maybe I'm the only one, and if I am, I'll sit down.
But it's difficult. Like we had different lists of items that we said we don't want to do. One was, for example, the presentation protocols that Richard mentioned earlier. Now we have this sort of out of scope list, the general key discovery listed here explicitly. And we haven't had a discussion about like, I don't want whatever credential format.
And for example, one thing we could start with is you could say, we're starting with, like here are three categories of subjects that we're going to definitely do. And we will consider additional subject types later, or, like there are any number of ways. You don't have to like completely define what you're going to do, but like having some scope on this, I think is going to be really important. Otherwise, I think we're going to be, you're just going to be stuck in the like endless rat hole of new proposals, some of which are not really that relevant.
So hi, this is Roman Dinadu, co-sec AD on this. I'm using my prerogative to kind of jump in here to explain kind of some of the background that Hannes kind of shared with us. So we had the BOF last time. We went to the mailing list and we actually did a consensus call, and we found consensus around most of the language that's already in this charter. Where we did not find consensus and we needed to potentially tune it based on the feedback was around some of the privacy and security words. That's slide 17. And then we did a lot of talking about how do we finesse correctly the words for kind of on slide 20 around the metadata and capability discovery kind of protocol. So I just wanted to remind the audience here why the presentation, the tee up looks a little asymmetric is because we have already found a lot of consensus kind of on this, and because but we did not finish and we had the BOF scheduled, here we are, and now we're revisiting, I think, some of the issues we thought we previously had decided on the mail list because we have a much broader audience, which again is appropriate. I mean, we're here, we talk about it, but that's a little bit of kind of the context about why some of this feels decided to some of the proponents, because we found consensus and we declared that on the mail list.
Perfect, thanks. Brian.
Been a minute since I queued. Let me
closer to
mic. Right, eat the mic. Just a couple of things I noticed on the charter text as we're going through this. One is the metadata capability discovery, as already talked about it, was very, very much about key discovery. And the noting here, the SD.VC metadata is very, very much about key discovery, whilst the charter specifically says metadata or key discovery is out of scope. So there's a disconnect there that needs to be resolved somehow, I think. Or he's shaking his
head. You want to respond to that quickly?
So we asked on the OAuth mailing list regarding the charter deliverables, and this particular deliverable was flagged by Tony Nadlin. He said it was overly generic. And then he asked us to be specific that we were doing key discovery for the security formats that we are describing in our charter deliverables, not general purpose key discovery for whatever you want it to be. And that's why that sentence is in the out of scope section.
Okay, I didn't understand that, but maybe it feels like there's a disconnect. Maybe you can explain it later. Maybe it doesn't need to be addressed. The other point I wanted to make on the charter text was there's somewhere, maybe the one before this talks about SD.jot being unlinkable and developing similar stuff here. It's really not unlinkable. There's all kinds of contortions you can go through to make it unlinkable, but I think qualifying it that way and the related SD-CWT work is probably a bit of an overstatement, and unlinkability should maybe be dropped from that part of the charter.
Okay, that's good feedback. Yeah. Mike.
I think the unlinkability aspect, just a quick clarification there, was in relation to like JSON web proofs, et cetera. While I'm a little skeptical of that unlinkability, it is a thing that people are claiming, and wanted to include here. I'm going to note that I personally would be fine with keeping the program of work and the milestones, because I think it's stuff that everyone has kind of agreed we want to do. And one of the key things when we look at the program of work is right off the bat, it says we're going to go define this terminology and what it means in the IETF. And I think it's a valuable thing. I think it's actually a very valuable thing. We could probably say, all out of scope, we cross off all JSON LD stuff. Cool, neato, right? We just saved ourselves a huge headache and we let W3C deal with that. That would be great for me. And so that might be a simple addition there. The rest of it's just kind of informative text that's like background that people argue over, but isn't really about the work. And I see us spending a huge amount of time over things that we just said we haven't defined yet what they mean in IETF. And so I wonder if there's not a simpler, more concise thing that just says these concepts exist. This group will define them as related, and here's where we're starting. And I think we could probably cut the charter text in half and have something we could work with. And we already know there's a pile of people in the room already writing code to this stuff and already writing drafts. So that would be nice to see that move forward.
Thanks, Mike. Maria?
Mia Kulevind, I would like to understand the relationship with W3C actually a little bit better. So you said they define a data model. Is a SPICE supposed to use the data model, or is SPICE supposed to build based on that data model, or is SPICE doing something that is evolving completely independently? So what's the dependency and how much do we need to coordinate there?
Brent Zundell. So the dependency is conceptual. There are concepts and capabilities and ideas that came out of the W3C work. And those concepts, I think, are consistent with what is being discussed within SPICE, but there's no intention within SPICE of using the actual data model that's out of the W3C.
Just to double clarify, so you mean they, like, both groups could like develop things independently, moving different directions, and we wouldn't have a problem with that?
I think that there are enough people coordinating between the two that ideally we wouldn't move too far apart, but theoretically, yes.
Just to put a real fine point of it, the W3C verifiable credential data model is a work of philosophy. It is not interoperable in any way. So like it describes an overall gestalt of a thing, which, you know, the W3C JSON LD stuff is aligning to. This stuff will inevitably align to it because what the gestalt it describes is basically, you know, it has the bits that you expect in a credential like this. So like, yes, we will end up having the right shape, but there's no need for any explicit coordination, much less like technical coordination.
Martin.
Yeah, Martin Thompson. As liaison to the W3C, the fact that there's no mention at all of that work in this charter concerns me, even if all of the things that have just been said are true. I would like to see something in here to, I guess, address that concern. Because what we've found in the past is that having a very clear delineation between work that happens here and work that happens there, and an understanding from both parties that this is the case, we can make progress. But if we don't have that understanding up front, it ends in bitterness and recriminations and endless arguments, and I'd rather not have that happen. So if there's something we can do to head that off, that would be really good. The second thing I got up here to say is that the use of selective disclosure here is fine, but there's a lot of work talked about here that is not selective disclosure. It's this unlinkability part, and they often use very different technologies, and that is not really acknowledged in this charter at all. It really just sort of says, well, we're going to do this grab bag of things, and those are systems that have very different application domains and very different properties out the other end of them. And if you just sort of lump them all together and just assume that the working group's going to work it out, I suspect that we'll end up with trouble. So I'd like this scope to be clearer. That's a great transcription of what I just said.
Yeah. We can copy that into the charter text right away.
Roman Dinelli again pulling AD prerogative to explain kind of history. The original charter text had references to W3C. When we went to the mail list, did the consensus call, the request was, after a lot of back and forth, said, because of the reasons Richard was talking about, to pull it out. Because folks were asking for, there was a lot of detail about what Mira is asking specific bindings and kind of all the rest, and that was confusing the audience. And so the consensus was to pull it out, which we can revisit here.
And as I think Mike said earlier, like a lot of the reason we were here having this discussion is that the folks in the W3C, the participants there didn't want to do the work that folks wanted to do. And so we're doing it here.
So say that. One sentence, this is related to the work over there, but it is not the same. Just acknowledge that fact and make that very clear. And if we have folks over on the W3C side, sitting in chair positions and whatnot, who understand that, and folks over here that understand that, we're all happy. The problem here is that there is a very good chance that there's some overlap between the works that are going on here and there. And we need to make sure that when there's an argument, we can go, look, there's the agreement. And that's an important function that charters provide.
Okay, Ori.
Yep. Thanks. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I thought I'd come to the mic just to attempt to make it really clear what the connection points are between the IETF work that's existed and the W3C work. So I think I said this in the chat, but I'm going to say it on the mic. The primary difference is at the data model layer. IETF uses IANA registries for JWT and CWT claims. And then there's a policy for what are called like private claims or non-registered values. And that's worked well for protocols that needed interoperability around certain values, and for protocols that needed to have arbitrary values that weren't in the public registries. And just to add another organization to the mix of verifiable credentials to make the point even stronger, the ISO MDoc format also uses a claims registry structure. And so if you think about IETF, ISO, and W3C, each of them have a sort of a payload approach, but ISO MDoc and W3C both use IETF COSI Sign 1 or JSON Web Tokens or SD-JOT. W3C has one security format that they've developed in W3C called data integrity proofs, and that is a JSON LD specific security format that generates signatures over the JSON LD media types, but doesn't support signing arbitrary content like a JSON web signature or a COSI Sign 1 can sign arbitrary content. So just to be clear, like there is a kind of clear connection points between these organizations, but all of them are using the term verifiable credential to describe the secured object that moves through the system. They're all using the same term issuer and holder and verifier to describe their roles. And I think versions of the charter have had much of the text that has been requested at the mic line here, and then other folks wanted to remove it. So if you want the full history, most of it's on the mailing list. And I'm happy to answer any more technical questions folks might have about how these connect, but appreciate Martin's comments, and I think we can probably add some text back.
I think by now it should be clear to everyone that there is a long history, and we haven't even gone back like the last 20 years on this topic to InfoCard or so. And like we can't all describe this in the charter. It's interesting, but you could write a book about it. Anyway, Colin.
So Colin Jennings, I mean, I don't really care much about the history and I wasn't part of the most recent discussion, but I am looking at the charter now from do I believe I have a consensus for it, which is what we're going to have to measure at some point. And I definitely see this as coming out of a large portion of basically venue shopping between two different SDOs of W3C. Or, I ask myself, is this charter clear enough that I can determine whether something should be in that venue or this venue? And I have a really hard time reading this charter and knowing what's in or what's out. I really do. And it's not like I don't it is a space I know at some level. So I'm pretty sure I'm probably not the only one that's sort of asking that. And, the verified credentials is one group that I can easily see things being venue shopped between what's being proposed here and what's being proposed there with no way for us to sort that out. That may not be a big deal. I'm sure lots of people would be thrilled about that. It may be a big deal, but it seems like a bigger deal to us that just ignoring the venue shopping issue, even of just, is this crisp enough of what's in and what's out, particularly the first version?
Well,
So
let's have a look.
that's my feedback.
Digital credentials covering JSON web proof and the CBOR web proof. Like,
Look, that's like saying media that you could represent in UTF-8 or octets. Like, who cares? I don't care whether exactly the little details of this. That is an infinitely large thing, what you've already said right there, right?
I don't think so. Like in this context, like when it comes to JSON LD versus some other technology, I don't think it's an indefinitely large. I think this is basically pointing straight to the work in a Jose working group that is currently ongoing by a couple of folks in this group.
Yeah, Colin, JWP and CWP are specific formats, specific encapsulations for specific security properties. So like maybe digital credential profiles.
Yeah, but is there a limit to what claims I can put into those credentials?
I mean, there's not a limit to like the
Okay,
subject alt names you can put in a cert. Like
That's
but
exactly
that's
what
the cut. That's the cut point that's deliberate.
Okay, so that's not really a cut point. Given you can put anything in any of those, it's not a cut point.
So like, I mean, would you charter PKICs today? Like,
I defer to the room.
But like PKICs,
No,
Jose,
I'm not. But
like OpenPGP, like if you have any number of secure container things.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to poke at where the line is. Okay, I'm trying to sort of say that if it's like we're going to do all types of credentials of all forms in here, fine, right?
No.
But that's not like Hannes shakes his head when I said that. So I'm not arguing what it should be or shouldn't be. I'm saying when I read it right now, I can't fully understand what it is or not.
Fair.
Okay. Okay. Funny. Brent.
Brent Zundell. There's been a lot of conversation just really recently about how the charter started and changes that were made to it over the long, in the mailing list. Last round of calls for consensus, it seemed like we did have rough consensus on the charter text version 3. I still think version 3 is a great charter. At the same token, I haven't heard anything that folks have said, hey, I would like this added to the charter, this clarification made, that I would oppose. I'd be happy to see those incorporated in, but I'm concerned about endless churning on the charter text because we've already seen, hey, the charter used to say JSON LD, W3C stuff, and then that got taken out. Now we're talking about putting it back in. We have to stop somewhere, and we have to say this is the thing. And I'm curious if we said version 3 is the thing, how the room would feel about that. I'm just like, where are we as far as consensus on the charter text as it exists now? I'm curious about that.
Oh, and
Sorry, just a practical point. Will people who walk to the mic please announce who they are? The people at the remote have some trouble because of some lag on the names disappearing on the top of the screen for who is actually speaking. So please say your name.
Yeah, we'll ask that question for sure. Manu. No, Mike is first. No, the other Mike. Sorry. Sorry, too many mics.
Mike Perrock here, one of many mics in queue and in the room. I think there's a pretty clear delineation that when we originally proposed some charter text, even just bouncing things around on the list, et cetera, we kind of came up with, which is basically we need to be able to do some of this stuff without JSON LD, and in particular in binary for, actual wire transmission type stuff. Cool, neat, right? So we could add out of scope if we really want to, but I think the actual program of work is pretty clear that we've got 4 basic things that we can start with. People have already started on them. I think it would be a shame to come out of this churning more and more on charter text. I doesn't even mean I like all the charter text that's in there, but does it support the work I need to move forward with, that my customers, I mean, we're sitting here with live real use cases, like we're testing stuff with multiple government agencies. We need interoperability. We can't find that out of esoteric science project reinventions of XML DSIG in JSON LD. Like, it's not a good thing. So this gives us a way to do this for real.
Manu.
Yeah, Manu Fontaine with Hushmesh. I'm one of the contrarian on the list, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I'm also a newbie at the IETF. I actually very much support the idea of internet credentials. I think they are very important. I'm, supporting the work of the working group, assuming that we can in fact open up the work and it's really for working and propose different ideas. I have some issues with some of the words that are in there. I do also have some very specific use cases that we approach radically differently. In particular, I came to the IETF because I believe that internet credentials should be at the internet layer, not at the web layer, because the web is injecting a domain authority over credentials that need to be held by entities like holders that may not be domains, and there should not be domain insiders having access to those things. We've actually approached the problem, and our company is working on a system that tackled the decentralized key management issue first. So I'm a little bit bothered by the idea of having key management completely out of scope, because we actually discovered that if you solve that problem first, then other things fall into place. We had a hot RFC and a side meeting yesterday to discuss some of this work. It is functional, it is code, it's out there, and it works. So I just wanted to make that comment that I think we are onto something that's super important, that we should move forward with this topic, but we should keep an open mind a little bit longer maybe, instead of trying to just fall back onto existing patterns that have some dead ends. One more thing that I wanted to say, and Hank, I'd love to touch base with you. This morning I was in the RATS meeting, and we talked about RATS Nest, which I loved, which is a fantastic problem that shows indeed that there's rats all the way down, and it used to be turtles all the way down. It used to be digital certificates and key management, and then figuring out the binding between a key and a specific entity who has authority over the key. That problem remains unsolved. If we solve that problem first, the rat nest goes away, the key management problem goes away, and then we can get to internet credentials. So I hope we can move forward with this in an open forum way so that we can share new work and new approaches. Thanks.
Mike Jones.
Mike Jones. When I mentor people who want to do work in the IETF, I tell them that you succeed here by proposing a solution to a real problem or set of problems that people know they have, or that they can be convinced that they have. And this work meets that criteria in my mind, that there's specific credential formats that are needed for some of the use cases that have been talked about, that are binary, that are based on CBOR and draw from some of the CBOR web token experience. And so I think we're in a good place. We just need to finish a charter and form a working group and do the work and solve the problems. I will also put on my hat that I am one of the editors of the W3C verifiable credentials working group specs, that both the VC data model and the securing with JSON Web Signature and with COSE. And I do want to address Cullen's venue shopping point. I don't see there being venue shopping here any more than it was venue shopping for us to charter a new COSE working group because it was doing a different thing than Jose. It's a very related thing, but doing binary signatures was different than doing JSON signatures. And I'm fine acknowledging that, but in the W3C world, they're enamored with semantic web and JSON LD. And more power to them. They didn't want to do this other work. This other work is needed to solve some problems. The IETF is good at doing things to solve problems. So I think this is wholly appropriate. Thank you.
Hank.
Hi, this is Hank. Yeah, basically, Mike, you said like 80% what I want to send to Cullen, but this scoping down to claims, yeah, that's not the shopping thing. That's the actual cool thing. And I cannot stress enough that we can put the exact same concepts that we have in the payload into the header now and into the unprotected header. And that is such a cool mechanism and that's all in the program of work. But if the text before the program of work needs some massaging, I think we're already good. I mean, it might need all the best text, but I think after 3 months of consensus building, it's good enough. If there's really something bad in there, tiny pull request maybe, but I actually don't think it's necessary anymore, to be honest.
That's a good point, Hank, because I've been wondering how to address your point, Cullen. I understand how to address Martin's point. Or Richard, you have the proposal on how to address Cullen's point.
I do, yeah, actually.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, this
How
is Martin
convenient.
Thompson. So I think there's actually some synergy between the how do we talk about W3C, VC data model point and Cullen's point, because I think that's actually the scoping of how we want to constrain this is to roughly what's in the VC data model. We want to build a thing that has like an issuance time and an expiration time and a slot where you say here's the identity stuff and a signature scheme. And yes, there will be agility as to what goes in the identity bucket, but the framing of all the the X509 bits about issuance time, expiration, who issued it, things like that, like that's the stuff we'll nail down here. So I think we could probably clarify, hit both of these points. We say that we're going to try and define things roughly at the level that the VC data model defines things. So clarify that, but also is establish what we're going to do here and where the flexibility is.
So you are saying with the charter should have a sentence saying that the type of claims that would be.
Well, so actually, probably. So I think it's useful that Cullen, as a naive observer here, not that Cullen's naive, but so someone who's not deep in this space, like came in and hooked on that digital credential profiles phrase, because I think when those of us who've been working in this space, we kind of see digital credential and we think roughly the stuff that's in the VC data model. And so I think just probably a sentence saying that, like, when we say digital credential, we mean roughly what's in the VC data model. Like that would provide that caveating and give that phrase like the meaning that we intend.
Okay. I'm trying to sort of let that settle in what you said. John.
Hi, John Bradley. So I think it might be useful. I think Mike Prorock may have said it, gone down this road, but being clear that what we're working on is not RDF, is not linked data, that has a role when you want to embed these sorts of things in web pages, which is kind of where a bunch of the W3C stuff, W3C cares about the web. And we have other protocols and other considerations. So yes, at a high conceptual level, the security elements of things in the W3C VC data model are similar to things in JOT, and will be similar to the things that we will undoubtedly have in the formats that we're doing. I mean, essentially, we're taking jots and adding some additional proof of possession for taking a verifiable credential and making a verifiable presentation. So there's high level things, but I think if we're clear that we're working on claims registry based data models to answer some specific protocol issues, and that's separate from a data format or a data model point of view from some of the stuff that the W3C is doing. I'm fine with saying you want to do RDF, go see those guys. And that, I think that would be perfectly fine to put in the charter. But I agree with Mike Jones that we should, close on this. I think this is important work. I'm involved in 2 large scale pilots in Europe where we're rocketing ahead, and in some, there are components of IETF specs like Jose, et cetera, SDJWT, which are all involved in that, but it's just bits and pieces of IETF specifications. There isn't any overall architecture. Most of the architecture stuff is actually coming from OpenID, with providing the bits and pieces, and maybe can we put together something where either OpenID adopts JSON objects and other things, or we have alternatives, because yes, we did kind of there was a symbiotic relationship between OpenID and JWT, because Nat and Mike and I all developed them in parallel, but we're not necessarily bound forever to JWT. It's great when you can move on and keep progressing. So I think we need to, beyond RDF. So I think that we should just acknowledge that there's a subsection of that work that should belong to them, and move on.
So this is something we had in a 0.0 version of the charter text. So yeah, if it's too small, I can barely read it myself. The W3C has published a verifiable credentials data model version 2.0 specification with data serialization in JSON LD. In this charter, this specific specification or defined concept of verifiable credential and verifiable representation or presentation is captured using the wording digital credential and digital presentation respectively. Is that something? So no, it's not a question. You should be. I'm trying to sort of. Well, I didn't know where to put the text out of it.
So, we could do a poll on it, because this is the text that was removed from Charter 0.0. So and it seemed like the room was thinking that maybe we should put this back. So maybe we do want to do a poll on that.
Can I directly reply to that? I'm not sure we're using Q here. I think this is exactly the opposite what we want, because that gives the impression these things are so closely connected that we have to think them, and you should actually say they are not connected. They can evolve independently. No, but like you have to put something in that explains that part, that there isn't this dependency.
I mean,
yeah. Like I'm looking for some good wording here.
Yeah, I think so it's a little tough, because on the one hand we want to say we're following the conceptual outlines of the VC data model, but on the other hand we're absolutely not using this like RDF data model. So yeah, I think maybe saying that we're following it conceptually but not literally. Some flavor.
Okay. So like,
Since there's silence and I'm still in the queue, I'm going to try and follow on from Richard. So so the W3C verifiable credentials working group has done a good job of kind of claiming some mind share around verifiable credentials, but they didn't invent the notion. So there are common conceptual things that have existed prior to that particular working group at the W3C. Somebody mentioned info cards. Which so
I was weak.
So there are precedents beyond. So you may as well mention info card and say, look, there is this model. It goes back a long time for a three-party model, which the W3C has similar ideas, have made progress on that. We are doing a similar thing at a conceptual layer, but I wouldn't say that, look, they invented it and we're kind of copying them. I wouldn't put it quite that way.
I agree, and then that's partially why I also mentioned this prior work, and we could theoretically go back even further, right? Like the concept of three parties, one issue, but anyway, we are trying to find some appropriate wording that makes everyone happy. And Roman, could you give it a try?
Hi, Roman. We're obviously going to have to put it on the screen, but I'm verbally reading. SPICE will follow the conceptual data model of the W3C VC, but will not work on RDF data models. That sounded like the two things in terms of scoping I heard. Do we have to say that? I think we had multiple people on the mic line that were insistent on it, frankly, but if we don't, please have them come to the mic line.
Yeah, several people now said that they want to express something along those lines.
Can you say instead of follow, build on or something? Because follow seems like
Inspire.
I'm jumping
follow
line or whatever, but I was going to say, if this is all being constructed for me, I found the people that replied to me sort of compelling. And we had quite a few people from very good positions at W3C speak to this isn't a problem, right? And we had other people here, this is relatively clear. And so I don't know that, I mean, I do think that having some comment that acknowledged the existence of the W3C and that this was done might be a great thing. But I don't think we need to fine tune some text here that's going to really help. I think that it was, back to the comment from somebody over here was, look, here's what we're doing, the program of work. People don't really have a problem with that. It's leave it alone at that if that's what people want to do. I'm fine with that.
Yaron Sheffer. Going back to something that Justin said, that they mentioned it as vertical, horizontal. I think this needs to be the community, the home for a verifiable credential or VC-like work at the IETF. And so that's on the positive side. On the less positive side, I think we have a very clear technical vision where we don't like JSON LD, we don't like RDF, we want it to be performant and so binary, but some of us do like JSON. We have much less clear business vision. And that's where the contrast between human identity and non-human identity comes into the picture, where the charter talks very clearly about human identity and the use case document talks about physical supply chains. I think that there will be implications if the focus is on human identity, then privacy, unlinkability, all of that is really important. If the focus is the other side, there will be other things that we're frankly not even expert on, so we don't really know. And I would suggest that maybe initially we focus on human identity only. to know what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
that was something that we also talked about, and like those were just some examples to have some examples of claims in our attributes, and these privacy aspects exist in, or these privacy challenges exist in also in sort of enterprise context. If you think about the product passport for something like even sort of a battery passport, like you want to indicate on like CO2 emission sort of produced along the supply chain, even there you have privacy sort of like business.
Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe for regulatory reasons, you need to be transparent and to not encrypt it. I don't know, and we don't know.
I think that's something we have to debate on what exactly the issues are if we actually get to that point in a working group. We don't discuss that in the charter text, I think.
Yeah, but the charter implies that there will be people coming in with ideas on how to do verifiable credentials for textile factories. And we will not even know if what they're doing is applicable to the industry. And we're now stuck in a corner where we should accept everybody coming in.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
Strange ideas.
You know why not? Because we have 4 items charted as documents that we would be working on, and then we would have to do a rechartering. We would still have the group to even accept the work. Like you could theoretically come with any document to the DLS working group, and they will say, "Hell no." Like this is the. No, because the people say no. The charter is so generic that it talks about the communication security protocol. But I have Roman created some text out of this earlier, and I would
just
like
to complete my sentence. If we are interested in non-human identities, I think the charter should actually be clear about it and allow for profiling by external organizations. So we should make it very clear that anybody who wants to can profile the work that we do for their needs, with or without unlinkability, with or without selective disclosure, according to their business needs.
Okay, but let me try to get a completion on the earlier issue before we go into this one. So the text I'm going to put into a poll is basically a proposal to add it to the charter, and you either indicate that you, by saying yes, that you think it's a good addition to the charter, and by saying no, obviously not. So, yeah, is that, well, you haven't seen the text yet. You want to first react to a discussion that is related to the text I'm going to show? Okay, so Carsten, you are further down the line. Yeah.
Carsten Bormann. So the reason I reacted pretty strongly here is somebody said, you may not know that they said that, but they said.
Speak into the mic, please. Yeah. Don't take it home.
Anyway, they said we are going to take the W3C work, rip out RDF, and be done. And I wouldn't want to have text like that in the charter, please. Yeah, we are not going to follow the W3C work here. We will be inspired by it, but this is not delineating our work.
Yeah, we have inspired, not ripped out. Okay, flash it up. Can you read that? So SPICE will be inspired by the conceptual data model of the W3C VC, verifiable credential, but will not, forgot the N, will not work on the RDF data models. You know, it won't win a Pulitzer Award.
Can we discuss the wording?
Oh,
20 minutes left.
20 minutes left. So you choose your time wisely. Do you want to bash this text?
Yes, I'm in the queue. I'd rather have my chance to speak.
What do you want to talk about this or some completely new topic?
No, not new topic. We're still talking about this.
Okay,
not new
go for it.
Ray Lutz. My main topic is election security, and this would be very good for many aspects of election security. I do have a bit of a consternation about the general key discovery. First of all, in your example, you talk about key discovery. Then you say it's not in there. Some people want key discovery in. Maybe you can say that specific or some kind of non-general key discovery is included, because clearly it would need to be maybe one of the most important things that's being done with this protocol. And the least important is metadata, and that is a quagmire. And that's what RDF is all about. So if you go down into RDF and you start talking about metadata and metadata vocabularies, then you get into this quagmire of eternal discussion that you will never stop. So you can have a bucket that you put in metadata of any kind, and you say that will be resolved by another group, and then have this group focus not on metadata exactly, not on RDF, but instead probably mostly on key discovery, very specific key discovery for the application in this area. And specifically for me, I want to be able to discover the keys for RATS devices and for people that are working in election situations. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Rowan May. So I heard a couple times people say, you know, hey, well, we could get a PR for the charter text. So the first message I sent in the chat today was, is there a GitHub repo for the charter text? So please send that in the group so that we can send our PRs and not waste time talking here at the mic.
Well, we have been like 4 months or so, 5 months, 6 months, if not longer, discussing PRs on the charter text. So you're a little late at the party, but so we are really on the normally in the fine-tuning phase.
Welcome to the IETF, Hannes. Thank you.
But what's your point?
Do you have an objection to posting it on in the chat? Okay, thanks.
John Bradley. So I think that the conceptual data model is a problem. We should be talking about SPICE will be inspired by the conceptual security model of MDocs, W3C, VC, InfoCard, and some other examples. So we're inspired by the security model, but the RDF data model is out of scope. So I think saying that we're inspired by the data model but it's out of scope is confusing. It's the security model, I think that yeah.
So you said MDocs, InfoCard.
Yeah, just
okay. Okay. Let me see how MDocs is written. Do we have others still in the queue? Mike?
Yeah, I have a pretty concrete proposal, since I probably started off a lot of this whole mess that we're all talking about now in conjunction with some hallway conversations with some others some time ago, right? And part of that was just, let's get a list together, right? And we have a nice little intro in that list. It's probably not perfect, but we're arguing a lot about intro and clarification of what's in, what's out, where's the history and all that. Could we just grab the intro from the list, drop it in here as the intro to this, and say, we've got a program of work that defines these 4 work items. We're not doing generalized key discovery for all things for right now. We can always figure that out later and come back to it. And here's these milestones we know we're going to start with. And I would love it if we could at least get a sense, and obviously up to the discretion of the chairs, but if that were the proposed thing, could we move forward with that? Because there was a lot of discussion over how do we even describe this list, right? And what are we talking about here? And so maybe we just start there. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect path forward, but I'm not hearing a lot of objection that says, oh, we shouldn't do these milestones we're talking about. Everyone seems to say, yeah, we want to go do these things. So can we just see if that maybe is a path forward that we could, get some consensus around and move on to the running code aspects?
Your proposal, Mike, wouldn't address this specific item we are currently dealing with, which I'm trying to resolve, like what's kind of out of scope, which seems to be important to a number of people here in the room. So I would really like to get that sort of wrapped up. It's not there.
I think it gets at what's not in scope in a very specific way, because the second section of the intro, it says very clearly that this is about the use and construction of CBOR encoded verifiable credentials and identifiers. That's what's in scope. That obviously carves out a lot of other stuff. It says, yep, this may be related, but we've got a starting place here, and it's by saying we're dealing with CBOR type stuff, right? And so that might be a way to constrain the scope very clearly to what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry, so we have
Mike Park, and one other clear thing, because it very clearly states that we're not talking about authentication and authorization. Those are things covered by other areas, right?
So Martin Thompson and Jabber offered another attempt at this. So let me read that. SPICE will develop designs that follow the conceptual security model that is used in the W3C, VC, ISO, MDocs. SPICE will not seek to extend or integrate any of those specific technologies. Can anyone who doesn't like that speak up? Okay, so then I think we can maybe do. So are we now at the point where people seem to be in consensus with the charter text with these 2 items that we've added, one about the W3C and the one we just read? Is that a poll we can do near the end? Yeah. Okay.
You just read the one about W3C.
I think we folded that together into one. So it's the poll I would like to make is the charter version 3, which is the one on the website and also on the slide, plus the text from Martin Thompson that. Yeah, nobody is going to read the pull request now, but but you should create a pull request. But you just heard what the text is. So okay, let me create that poll which says version 3 plus the change proposal that Martin just made. Is that acceptable to you? Yes or no? Okay, start that.
I'd just like to point out that however you guys edited that question, the tool marked me as automatically voting to it the same answer I'd done for your previous one.
Oh, how did I do that? But I didn't, how do I do that?
I don't know. It seems like a tool problem, but Colin jokes. Anyway.
Yeah. It's probably copied from some other voting experience. I'm not going into details. Yeah. You always voted for X. Would you like? Just joking. Okay. So like judging from what I see here, at least the last 30 minutes, bashing this text was useful. Okay. 5 more seconds and then close it. Okay. Done. This was pretty clear. So the number, we had 40 yes, and 1 said no, and 9 said no opinion. Can we capture that in the notes? I think that's important. So 40 yes, 1 no, and 9 with no opinion. Yeah, so there was 1 no. Does that person want to say something on a microphone? It's okay. It's okay. It's cool. Good. How do we take it from here? Okay.
Cheers. There's a request in the chat to flush the queue so that some people would like to talk about new topics.
Okay, new topics.
And we don't have a lot of time.
Okay. So, but just to wrap this up, so I think this was quite clear. You have been happy in the end with the discussions and with the text proposal. So we are going to ship the charter to the ISG as with that change. Martin, if you create a PR, then we can do that. Awesome. Okay, but how much time do we have left? 8 minutes. 7 or 8 minutes. New topics. Manu, did you want to talk about a new topic?
Yeah, Mani Fontaine Hushmesh. I wanted to address the concept of internet credential, including humans and non-humans. I think from our work, what we see is that any credential for a non-human entity does roll back up to some human. So there's always privacy concerns in all cases because you want the chaining and the accountability that goes to a specific human entity and organization entity. So I think we need to address all types of entities and include privacy and agency aspects to our work.
Thank you. Thank you, Manu. Nick.
Nick Doty, Center for Democracy and Technology. I think the points that were raised about venue shopping and the long debate about what this is at IETF or W3C does increase my concern about ensuring that you think this work will be done in a ways that protect people's privacy and human rights and aren't primarily used for surveillance and coercion and exclusion. Those seem like particular risks. Having many venues where this work can happen at any time, it makes me concerned that people who don't like the privacy protections in one place can just pick another place and go there. I think there's an opportunity. I think certainly the charter text has improved over some previous versions, but I think there is an opportunity that if the IETF wants to make this work effective and not harmful, that we should be We should be specific about our goals. We should make it part of the program of work that we are only going to do this if we think it can be done in beneficial rather than harmful ways.
What I actually, based on the feedback you provided at the last BOF, we've made a number of changes to in the body of the text to speak about privacy, security aspects, and also the fact, I believe, that we are specifically focusing on technologies that are providing certain privacy benefits is I think a big plus compared to what we previously had. Like we have these RSA blind signatures, we have the what are some of the other technologies? Yeah, the this is the zero knowledge proofs with these type of credentials. I think that's from where we are. Like if you think of a regular JSON web token or a Zebra web token, I think we are definitely stepping up the game here. So I would say we are heading in the right direction. Whether that will be ultimately enough for specific use cases and whether the implementations will be as good as they promised today, that remains to be seen, and we need to keep an eye on it. I think the JS will have to be pay attention to the actual specific deliverables, and hopefully you will be participating in a future working group here too.
Yeah, it's not just at the last BOF, also on the mailing list. I have been following up on these things to point out that privacy is more than just selective disclosure and more than just unlinkability. And while we have heard some positive suggestions about maybe there can be something good with zero knowledge proofs, I don't see any requirement here or any expectation that we are only going to ship technology if we think it's going to have those protections in place.
Yeah, but it's also at the same time it's difficult to describe the final solution in the charter text itself. I think we still have to do our homework and actually look at the specific details and then figure out on like what do we get with the various different solutions in the end. Like many of that work is still like JSON web proof, as I mentioned earlier, is still work in progress. Actually might be discussed. Was it discussed during this week already, Mike? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was discussed, but that's the non-profiled version for this group. So there would be more coming along the road, so to speak. So I think I'm positive. Nick, you know that I'm a big fan of privacy, and I understand that privacy is more than selective disclosure. Okay. Good. I think we exhausted our slot now. And if I look at everyone's face here, I think you too. Not just the time is expired, but
So 2 pull requests. Look at them.
Okay.
Now might be a good time for a summary from the AD.
Sure. I guess the summary said we actually spent a lot of time talking about the charter text, and we came into this into a long 6-month process that kept us fine-tuning further and further into the last little bits. And I think we actually narrowly made, thanks a lot, Martin Thompson, that last finish line where we got the last point where I thought we were completely derailing, but then suddenly everybody sat down and was smiling. So very good work. We'll send this onto the IESG, and then it's up to us to see if it's all working out, and then start finding chairs and get to work.
Thank you all.